Yes, how y'all feeling? Once again, I am Vic Jagger. Much love to my DJ, J. Period, providing the vibes out here. And I want to welcome you once again to our hip-hop vlog party. Y'all make some noise. We feeling good. Now, when I tell y'all, remember I said y'all weren't ready? Because we got some legends, some heavy hitters, and we're going to be doing a lot of things out here. I want y'all to get ready for our panel discussion. The Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop Rap Panel, the conversation with Jeff Chang. Give it up, y'all.
How's everybody doing out there? Thank you. So as you all know, this is the week that we're celebrating the 49th anniversary of the first hip hop party in the Bronx, in the West Bronx. DJ Kool Herc and Cindy Campbell got down to their rec center down at 1520 Sedgwick and launched the first hip hop party on August 11th. It happened on Thursday this week, right? And this is the biggest block party in the world happening this week to celebrate the 49th anniversary of hip hop. So we are thankful that you all are here to be with us. And I am incredibly honored to be able to introduce to you all the folks that we have on stage here with us. At the far left is Timothy Ann Burnside, who is a public historian. Yeah, please give it up. Museum professional, 20 years in the game doing this. And she launched the Hip Hop Collecting Initiative here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture in 2006. Thank you, Timothy Ann.
Yes.
We have Dr. Dwandalyn Reece, the Associate Director for Curatorial Affairs here. Yes, please give it up. Yeah. She curated Musical Crossroads, which you can see up here in the museum, and it won the Secretary's Research Prize. And both Timothy Ann and Dwandalyn are behind the Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop and Rap, which if you all haven't seen it, you have to check this out. It's in the bookstore, 9 CDs, 129 songs, 300 pages, liner notes, pictures, the whole nine, music. Everybody here that's on stage is in this, and it's a beautiful thing. And they also produce the first season of the award-winning podcast, All Music is Black Music, which is the truest thing ever said. Next to me, you know for Pocket Full of Stones, Riding Dirty, UGK, Trillo G. He's the host of the show on Rock the Bells Radio. Used to teach hip hop and religion at Rice University, so they call him Professor Trill.
Yes.
And now I understand he's the purveyor of the best burger in the United States of America, the Trill Burger, from Port Arthur, Texas, a gentleman, a scholar, and a king, Mr. Bun B.
Good afternoon, everybody.
We have the voice of hip-hop's global revolution, the conscience of the hip-hop movement as a leader of Public Enemy. He's the author of multiple books, including Fight the Power, Apocalypse 91, Revolution Never Sleeps, and This Day in Rap and Hip Hop History. All of these you can find in the bookstore. And he's the producer of the docuseries Fight the Power, How Hip Hop Changed the World, which is coming out next year. And a book of his art, first of 3 books. This one's coming out this fall, Artitation. And he's the founder and president of the just announced Union for Hip Hop, the Hip Hop Alliance. Please welcome Mr. Chuck D. And last but most definitely first, the pioneering rapper. Fearless in paving the way, creating the path for so many rappers to follow. One of the best battle rappers ever to do it in the game, in history. Now known as somebody who's keeping the community, holding the community as the host of Have a Nice Day on Sirius XM's Rock the Bells Radio. Please give it up for Roxanne Shanté. So I'm a hip hop nerd, as you all know, and I just want to hear, it's a trip to think about hip hop's humble beginnings, right? Getting started in the rec center at 1520 Cedric, and then it gets too small for the rec center, so they got to take it out to the block, right? So then they start having block parties, and then this whole thing becomes a culture. And now here we are 49 years later, celebrating that at this block party. I just wanted to ask you all for some of your memories, some of your fondest memories of block parties, the kind of celebrations during the summer, how hip-hop played a role in that, what y'all did, who you went to go see at that. I know you were ripping MCs at that, Roxanne. You were tearing MCs' heads off. Chuck, I know you were doing all kinds of stuff in Long Island, and I want to hear about the Port Arthur scene. Just what are some of your memories about the block party back during that period when you were coming up?
Well, I guess if I had to start it off, most of the time, most people say that they have been participating in hip-hop since day one, but I was blessed enough to participate since the night before. Mm-hmm. So watching the day ones pull up, there's always been those parties, those circumstances, those situations where you look and say, wow, this is hip-hop, and this is where it is today. So one of my fondest memories with hip-hop, because I'm coming from Queens, and I'm coming from Queenbridge, which is one of the largest housing projects in the world, if not the largest housing project, we had a place called River Park. And in River Park, we had DJs like Disco Twins, Pete DJ Jones, like different Flowers, So having those DJs participate in the park, I remember hearing Trans Europe Express. And Trans Europe Express, the very first time I heard it, put me in a trance. And it let me know that I needed to be in the park in front of one of those large speakers. When I was growing up, the speaker was called Bertha, but I didn't know what a Bertha was. I thought it was a lady. I thought they was like, listen, Bertha at the park. I was like, well, whenever Bertha's at the park, the music's really loud. I didn't know that Bertha was actually a speaker at that time. And I remember hearing Trans Europe Express and being literally in a trance following that beat. And I mean, for all of you who don't know what Trans Europe Express, I know I'm getting ready to say this wrong. Like, it go, like, well, anyway, that's how it sounds like that, That's my little beatbox of Trans Europe Express, but I was captivated, so I knew I wanted to be a part of whatever that was, and that was hip-hop.
I was a part of the, first of all, Phil, this is utopia being part of this stage from the left and the right, so I'm just applaud all of y'all, man, for real. Bun, Rox, man, and Juwan and Tab, and you, Jeff. So listen, I was a tweener. So tweener meant I was like 17 and 77 when Trans Europe Express came out, and I was part of big DJ units. So when Rox said Disco Twins and Flowers, those are like DJs are the ones that brought the whole environment to everybody. I was a tweener, so I tried to get up in the clubs where Curtis Blow and them was at, but they would tell me, no, you got to wait till you're 21. And when I turned 21, they looked at me and said, no, you got to wait till you're 25. I said, but the ladies are getting in there 16. But anyway, so the clubs were like a no-go, but in the parks and in the blocks, this is where everybody was able to get it big, and when they could get it and gather, and it was all about peace, love, unity, and having fun for real. Because the 70s told a lot of lies to everybody, but the music was the truth. And it definitely brought, and out of that, we didn't even think that it was inconceivable that somebody would make a rap record.
Right.
It was like, how you gonna put a 3-4 hour party event into a record? Because the DJs played records. And I was like, we played Long Island and also Eastern Queens. So yeah, Infinity Machine and King Charles, who also was up from the middle and north of Queens, and then you had the Bronx DJs, and then they was really smoking in Brooklyn. So all this combination of everybody playing music that sometimes you heard on the radio, or sometimes the radio stopped playing, this made a big bang effect that only was about taking this thing called hip hop to the next level. And it joined us all together with the transit system, of course.
Yes, it did.
I think for me it was different because I came from a very small industrial town in Southeast Texas. And so we didn't have a radio station. We didn't have like nightclubs or anything like that. We had like juke joints and lounges, but they was playing blues records. You know, they weren't playing hip hop. And so for us, we had to wait till like somebody came home from summer vacation in New York or something like that until our local DJs became members of record pools, and then they would get records. So for us, the only way we could get hip hop is that we had to go to somebody's house party or some block party and hope somebody had a record we had never heard. And then as an MC, as soon as a beat came on that you had never heard of something, you in the corner trying to rap to it, act like you could freestyle or something like that. You just wanted to be a part of the culture. We were very thirsty. We would literally take trips to Houston on the weekend just to go to record stores and look at records. We didn't have the money to buy a bunch of records. We would try to go in and listen to as much stuff as possible. I remember like going there and they had an advanced copy of the DOC, and I called home long distance to let somebody listen to it. It cost these people like $60. Way more than music would have even cost just to play. But I was just so excited about the album, I wanted other people to hear it. And so we would have to go to block parties, even sketchy block parties. Like there was a family that lived like 1 block away from my house, and it was all girls, but they used to fight everybody. Like they would go around and literally dudes, girls, it didn't matter. They would fight everybody. But they always had the best parties because their parents let you turn up at the house. And so it'd be like, yo, I know they're gonna be jamming tonight, but man, I don't want to go. I know something gonna pop off. And every time we would go, sure enough, the DJ would play some music you had never heard before. And sure enough, one of the sisters would pop off. Then the whole family pop off. Because this was one of those families that the sisters, the cousins, the mama, aunties, everybody gonna fight if one of them fighting. And I just didn't want to be a part of that. But I did want to be a part of the culture. And I'm sure New Yorkers can understand. You had to go through some risky situations just to get to the places where hip hop was being played and being displayed. And sometimes it was, you know, you had to fight to get out. People got cut or whatever. But that just tells you how magnetic the appeal of hip hop is and how important it was for, in the early days, to risk everything. Like we were risking it all just to be a part of the culture.
Yes, and it was worth it.
Yes, absolutely. I don't regret nothing. Every drop of it.
Roxanne, tell me a little bit about, you know, the vibe at the party. What do you see? And I'm also thinking here a little bit about what Bun's talking about. You got like a little generation gap going on as well, right? Between like certain music's getting played at a certain time of day, and then the older folks go away, and then it starts getting a little bit more turned up, right? So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing at Queenbridge as you're coming out to these things, and also how you got involved in wanting to be on the mic from that.
Okay, so let me just walk you through Queensbridge. We are walking through the largest housing project. Most people can say that they have neighbors, but growing up in Queensbridge, you have a total of 30,000 neighbors on any given day. That's 15,000 on paper and 15,000 who ain't supposed to be living with y'all. So those is cousins, friends, and everybody else that done eased up in the housing. You know, there would be some apartments where there was a 2-bedroom apartment and there was 14 people and they lived comfortably. You know, that's the vibe of Queensbridge. That's the family, you know, that unity that we would find in hip hop. So now you're walking out of your apartment building and you hear the music in the park. Now I lived on a block called 12th Street. In between the park and 12th Street was 2 more blocks. Now you had to hope that you didn't have beef or problems because you want to go to the park jam, but you got to walk past these 2 blocks in order to get to the park jam. And wasn't nothing going to keep you from going to hip hop. The same way how Bun said you were willing to risk anything. He was like, well, listen, I'm just going to have to fight my way to the party because I need to be there. So once you made it through the block and you walked up, they used to have a rope, very thin rope, nothing that could hold anybody back. But the respect of the rope was strong enough to keep an entire crowd from crossing it. There weren't no gates, there weren't no guards. It was just a rope, and the rope represented respect. So you could either be respected enough to be behind the rope, or you were going to be a spectator. So for a very long time, I was a spectator. Eventually, I slid under the rope. I remember my very first time doing that. There were other MCs, Jappy Jap and MC Shan, Infinite, and a few other MCs were on the stage. And they didn't want to give me the microphone. And it was like, she's a little girl. I know that there's just no way she could get up here. And I'm thinking to myself, if I pull the plug, am I gonna be able to make it through those 2 blocks back home safely? Because pulling the plug and stopping the party was a really big deal, especially if, and this is what I want you to envision this. Imagine a whole entire DJ system and party being powered from that power lamp right there. Now that means the DJ, and this is why we love and respect the DJ so much, because he was the neighborhood electrician. He was the electrician without training. He was the one who would go inside of something like that where if he touched the wrong wires could kill him. He knew what to touch, didn't use no safety equipment, had metal stuff in his mouth, holding one live wire here, taking something else, wrapping it up, but there was a technique to it. And the technique took time. So if you kicked it out, it was gonna be like another 45 minutes before he could reconnect. So they look over at me and then they see me easing toward the lamppost. Because now I'm willing to take my chances, because I'm Shanté. So I'm like, okay, I know I could run fast. I had been in Colgate games when I was younger, so I had a little track under my belt, already knew which way I was gonna run. But you're either gonna share this mic with me, or nobody's gonna rap. So I'm easing over towards the lamppost. And as I'm getting closer to, everybody's dancing and everything else, and I'm getting closer to the lamppost, then all of a sudden, DJ named Bob Lee from WBLS, he spots me. And he gives me that eye, like, don't do it, Shanté. Don't do it. And I'm easing, and I'm starting to lean down, and then all of a sudden, they put their hand up like, okay, we're gonna give the mic to Shanté from 12th Street. And that was the only thing that saved the party that day. So, I just needed to walk you through a Roxanne Shanté experience in Queenbridge trying to get the mic. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, ladies. You gotta do what you gotta do.
And we are so happy you grabbed that.
Rox just, she just gave everybody in talk the third verse of MC Shan's The Bridge.
Yes,
That's
because
right.
you're Jappy Jap, everybody was there, yeah.
Hey, Chuck, you were telling me a story about never imagining that this street culture, right, this block party culture, could ever get onto record. So tell me a little bit more about that, because I know you had an experience with that kind of situation.
No, I went to all the parties everywhere. One thing about Long Island is we went everywhere. We drove to the train, or took the bus to the train, went everywhere. So not only, and then I learned to do that with Daddy O, Professor Daddy O at Stetson Sonic. We knew we did that in every city in the country. We would go, if we didn't get down to Port Arthur, but in Houston and everywhere else in Texas, even Tyler, we tried to find the block that had the block party.
Right.
We sure enough knew where they was happening in D.C. with Go-Go, and also Maryland and Virginia, the DMV.
Yes.
So we would find these areas where they had their block party. Now, 10 years prior in New York, it was all about the DJs, because they de-emphasized musical instruments in New York City and the surrounding areas. They de-emphasized musical classes. And so therefore, out of that concrete, the roles that popped up was the DJ. And not only, and Rock said, back then, the DJs was all scientists. They were all nerds. Dudes and women in hip hop wasn't afraid to say, yeah, I do the number on you, right? But at the same time, I am a scientist too. So they were double skilled, right? In head and body. But so they were able to be electricians, and the DJs were able to kind of like make something out of nothing. But when I heard Eddie Chiba all summer of 1979 at one spot I went to, right? Because I was about going to the spot, get my dance on, whatever. Listen to all the, especially DJs with the breaks. he kept saying, I'm gonna come out with a record. I'm gonna come out with a record. I'm like, how you gonna put a record? How you gonna make this a record? You know, I was like, I could not conceive it. And all summer long, he was talking about, I'm gonna put out a record. And there was such thing as hip hop and B-boys and everything like, because they would have the Meadowlands up there, up in Jersey, that holds 80,000. They done built another one since. But they would have the Budweiser Superfest, just like they would have down here at RFK, right?
Yes.
And they would have like 20 groups, and they would all get down in the stadium. Well, the ones they would have in New York, they didn't have DJs. They had bands come in, but I kept saying like, damn, how come they can't have like Starsky and Hollywood up in here? And but 80,000 would still show up, and they would all be B-boyed and B-geared up, but it wasn't a record yet. And so when I first heard something close to it, it was King Tim III, Fatback Band out of Brooklyn. And I always liked the Fatback Band's records, but it was like when I heard it during the summer of '79, I was like, yo, I mean, this is close. But it wasn't something we was familiar with. When Rappers Delight came out, they came out what was happening that summer, and that was MCs and DJs over good times.
Yes.
And all it took was this good times to come back in the fall when it was hot in the spring and in the summer, and that's when it was like that light bulb that went off. It's like, oh, that's what hip-hop rap could be a record. And that was all she wrote, because the DJs now wouldn't even they could say, I'm not opening up the mic for MCs. I'm just gonna play this record. And back then, it wasn't how long Rappers Delight was, because it was 16 minutes, y'all. 16 minutes. That's long to y'all now, especially in TikTok, right? But it was how short they got it. It's like, damn, they took 3 or 4 hours and made it into 16 minutes. And the DJs, man, back then would play it back to back to back. Like, and the chicken tastes like wood, And that just laid it out later on down the line where and he's gonna stop through later on, the godfather and the founder of the Hip Hop Alliance, the first union, Curtis Blow. When Curtis Blow made Christmas Rapping in December of 1979 for Mercury Records, that was all she wrote. That's all she wrote, because that was the major, and then the independents followed, and hip hop was now on wax. And that allowed it to spread. That allowed the scene to spread, where people like, yo, whatever that thing that they doing up there in New York, we could copy it with our way and do the same. And Bun was talking about Bun, when me and Daddy-O would go to Texas, we was like saying, man, they got cuts here, they got Zydeco, they got blues. If we could just loop some of these joints, and then, because those are the joints that was sitting around the crib, right? When we were
Those
young.
are the crazy, nobody's were digging it.
But talk a little bit about that. You had a different kind of musical culture going on down south. And then there's the rioting culture, the car culture, which is a lot closer to what we had back out west.
Yeah, so for us, a lot of our earliest influence was gospel music, blues music, typically the kind of stuff that you would hear around the home. Me being from, having my family be from Southwest Louisiana, many people in my family actually speak French. So a lot of music they will listen to around the house is what they call Zydeco, which is traditional Cajun music, some of it in English, some of it in French. And so those were the songs that we used to sit around and listen to. And then, of course, when you're young and black, you grow up in a house full of Isley Brothers, Mays, and stuff like that. So if you listen to a lot of the early Southern hip-hop music, a lot of it is drawn from those type of influences. And the other side of it, of course, is the car culture. Now, New York obviously is a different beast because it's a very small place that a lot of people have to live in. And so cars are not natural to moving around in the city. And plus, it's an extra expense for people in New York. Whereas in Texas and Houston, because it's such a big city, it's such a broad city, and they didn't build Houston properly to really take advantage of mass transit. So everybody got to have a car to get where they're going. But the beauty of that is that everybody gets to experience hip hop in their own way as they move around through the city. In the years that I came into love with hip hop, which would be probably the mid 80s, going into the late 80s, bass was a big part of the culture for us. And so in the South, all the cars had a bunch of speakers in the back. We used to have a crew that used to ride around called the Yoda Posse, because they all rode around in the Toyota trucks with the flatbed. They'd have a bunch of speakers in there, and they would just ride slow through the hood, and they get to an intersection, and they would all like do a circle, and then go, and then the next car do a circle. And you literally, you could hear the bass from blocks away, be like, oh man, that's the Yoda Posse. They finna pull up, and you go out and listen. And I ain't gonna lie, a lot of times Trucker used to be y'all first album.
Well, I want to ask you a question, man. Well, you think that had something to do with the Toyota Center coming in?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, and people love the culture so much, they wanted to actually bring the culture out to the world. That's why in New York, people will walk around with their big boom boxes, because they just wanted people to know, hey man, I represent hip hop, this is hip hop, I'm a part of the culture. For us, it was the cars. And so in this age of 808 bass drum came one of the greatest moments of my life, and that was the 2 Live Crew. Ooh. And the 2 Live Crew opened my eyes up, shall we say, as a young teenage boy.
In more ways than one.
You know, and so that made me want to go to house parties even more and block parties even more, because if somebody was gonna play some 2 Live Crew, you already knew what the girls was finna do on the dance floor, and then you try to work your way up and see if you could squeeze in behind somebody and try not to get played. You know, but there was so many things that helped shape and mold our life, and you know, some of my greatest, earliest moments with friends and just trying to find myself and my identity came from interactions with people who all wanted to be a part of hip-hop culture. Some of my best friends in the world are people that I met in mutual places trying to be exposed to hip-hop. Like those block parties and house parties, you would hear a certain song come on and you never heard it before, and if you were a rapper, you tried to go over to the side and rap to it, and then the people that wanted to know more about hip-hop would go away from the dance floor and the party, and then they would go over to the cypher to see, like, yo, I didn't know. And that's how I realized, yo, people around me actually, they can rap. And you know, maybe if we took this more serious, we might be able to compete with the big boys. And again, this was very early. We were slowly starting to see hip-hop leave New York and exist in LA and exist in Florida. And we like, yo, we might be able to get a piece of this too. And once Rap-A-Lot Records released the first single, Car Freak, in 1987, that was it. I'm like, okay, if they can do it, we can do it. We just got to figure out how to get some money and some equipment, and there's no studios here in this town, so we got to go to Houston and find a studio. All of this stuff, we knew nothing about the process, nothing about how to make a record, but we knew we were gonna make a record, and here we are on my 30th anniversary of actually making music and presenting it to the public. And so everything that my life has evolved into outside of music, you know, hip-hop culture was a big reason why it happened. And if you look now, you go out in the world, you see any product, there's nothing being sold without some facet of hip-hop, or even just somebody, you know, trying to look cool. It's impossible to even try to look cool on TV in a movie without looking like something like a rapper or something like hip-hop, you know? So, I mean, we are primarily popular culture in this world, and I'm just so happy to have been a part of it.
We're gonna have to talk about the Trill Burgers as well. But I want to bring in Dr. Reece and Timothy Ann into the conversation here. Fast forwarding a little bit, you know, this is 2 questions. One is how would you kind of put all of the stories that we're hearing here into the larger context of telling the story of black music, right? Number one, and then number 2, how did it even become a thing here at the Smithsonian to be able to collect, you know, these pieces, these objects, these things that were so crucial to the foundations of hip-hop?
Okay, I'll take the first one, you take second. Okay, you know, my first response, not to be glib, is why not? We should not have to make a big deal about hip-hop being part of the Smithsonian. Hip-hop is just as instrumental as any ever cultural or social, political movement that's in the history of American history and culture. That being said, we know what society is like, we know the history, we know the blowback, we know all of that. But to me, it's just part of the continuum. I mean, just listening to these stories, these people who loved the music, who had skills, who had knowledge and experience that created this music. This is not some fly-by-night thing that people rallied against, or people tried to shut down recordings and things like that. It is a history and culture. It is standing on our forebearers and bringing it into a new age, a new voice, but also building something entirely new that has shaped the world. So it's absolutely right. Hip hop is infused in everything we do, the given time, and it's going to evolve from that. But it's a no-brainer. We've got hip hop, we had the civil rights movement, we had the Harlem Renaissance. It's no different. No different. It deserves the attention. It deserves to be preserved, and we all deserve, and our generations to come, to learn from it. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. I honestly thought I was here to talk. I was just been listening to y'all, which I could do all day, every day. To build on what Dwan was saying, we're seeing such an amazing, beautiful shift in the way that things like hip hop are being included in academic spaces and institutional spaces. And I think it's really important to achieve the balance between keeping and maintaining those spaces that are sacred for hip hop and also including them in other places, because they can exist in both, and they should exist in both. The sacred spaces need to remain that, but we can also have this beautiful sacred space that includes hip hop. And so, back in 2006, when I was across the street at American History, it was a different vibe, not gonna lie. I love that museum and my colleagues there, but it was early in the game for hip hop to be at a level like this. Like, we are all on the National Mall at a Smithsonian museum to celebrate hip hop. Can we just, with these folks here, no less. So in 2005, 2006, it wasn't what Dwan just stated. Well, of course it's here. It was why, how, what are the objects? What are the stories we could tell? Do they belong here? Is this old enough? Does it matter? Is it impactful enough? And those are all the kinds of questions that needed to kind of be addressed and answered. Fast forward coming into this museum, starting the collecting work back in 2010, our founding director, Lonnie Bunch, now Secretary of the Smithsonian, absolutely. He had exactly the mindset that Dwan did, and that was, it needs to be everywhere it belongs, period. So go out and find the things that help us tell those stories. And to do that work, we had, Chuck, the patience that he and the whole Cold Crush crew and everybody that you see in the museum, starting those conversations back in 2006, 2007, and this museum opening in 2016. And him seeing the gigantic Public Enemy banner on display for the first time. I'll never forget it. Chuck, you looked at me and you said, well, Tab, that's a lot of space. And I was like, yeah, it is. But that shift, and then thinking about the way that we're being creative about not just the stories that are being told and inclusive about the stories that are being told, but thinking outside of the box, if you will, for what are the objects that we're collecting. Pushing the boundaries, pushing the envelope. I was happy to sit in front of our colleagues in collections committees and explain why J Dilla's MPC needed to be here and what it even was and what it did and why we needed to have it.
Yes.
So kind of thinking about not just telling the same stories, using the same kinds of objects. Dwan and I were very insistent back in the day that exhibition was not going to just be guitars and gowns, right? That we were going to think about how we can tell these stories with very unique, very special objects. And that has been a labor of love, and that has been so many years of work, not just for the museums and the exhibitions, but the relationships with the community, because we don't do anything without the folks you see on this stage. We don't do anything, we don't make a move without making sure that the people whose stories you're seeing in the museum, if they are with us walking this earth, they are part of the conversation. We are reaching out to them. I can text Chuck and say, was it this year or was it that year? And he'll be like, I don't know. No, that's not true. He knows. He knows everything. And we can go to the source, because one of the things we think about when we're assembling the collection and we're putting all these stories together, there are no primary sources for most of these stories. There is no place to go and research and look this up. At least there wasn't in 2006 and even in 2010. And so if we think about the way that we're building a collection, it's not just the objects you see in the exhibition, it's for that primary source, so that in 100 years when someone's writing a book about any of these people on this stage, they can come to this museum and understand their story, not just through the material culture that has so many stories to tell, but it's through their own voices. It is inclusive of their own narrative from their own perspective. And that is something that Black music has not had at institutional levels like this before, where it's that engagement and it is those relationships. And we're incredibly proud and honored to even have them in the first place and be able to maintain them and to keep putting amazing things up in this beautiful museum. How those things get here, however, that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other panel. Yeah.
I'd like to say one other thing just about
Please.
space, and a thought crossed my mind. You know, hip hop is about claiming space that was already yours to begin with and having a voice. And there's some kind of parallel with the existence of this museum and the moment we are in now. I mean, you know, I'm probably the same age as some of you, maybe a couple years behind, but the world is so much more expansive than when I was coming up, and that people are saying what they think, want, and demanding that they be heard. And so it is somewhat in the spirit of this museum even existing that hip hop kind of generated and opened up the world for everyone to have a voice. So it's so much about our own individual voices, but also the spirit of community. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are we doing on time? Because I could ask questions all day. Are we? We just keep on going? Okay.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? All right. So Chuck, Roxanne, Bun, Chuck, you've got stuff in here in the museum, and Bun and Roxanne, you guys are both on the anthology. You got your stories up in there. My question to you all is, and all of you have been playing a really, really key role in being able to pass on your stories and the stories of your communities. How does it feel now? We're almost like, you know, half a century in to this. How does this feel to be able to be here, to see this type of stuff happening, to be able to celebrate this at the Smithsonian, on the National Mall, you know, Capitol's over there? Chuck?
I'd like to say quickly, like, this is what the fight is about. The fight is about respect. There's a difference between a museum and a cemetery. When you tell your own story, you have your own narrative. My pride, you know, the whole key about hip hop is not, you know, what hip hop could do for you, but what you could do for hip hop. That has been our whole narrative. For me to see Roxanne Shanté and Bun B next to me with the Washington Monument right there in the African American Museum right there, talking about something where she was ready to pull the plug and kick the speaker. Kick a hole in the speaker and jet, right? and Bun B, my bro. And I really missed that chance to get into that Rice class that I was invited to, but our schedules was always because of hip hop. And to see their faces, and Jeff probably writing the most proficient book on hip hop, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, a guide along with Davey D, you know, or the later version. That to me is the epitome of having the narrative and also being able to not be too far from the narrative of the people. Right there in the shadow of that. You can't ask for respect. You gotta demand and take it. And this is how this came to be. So to see them, right, to me, you know, it's like what it does for me. To me, you get no higher feeling than that. They make this happen in sports, because we happen to live in a sports-laden society. Excuse the Yankee hat. I'm a Met fan because I'm from Queens, right? Born in Queens. But hip-hop is bigger than sports, especially when it comes down to me. So hip-hop has claimed the Yankee cap. You know what I'm saying? So I'm wearing that, all right? But to me, that's pretty much what this symbolizes. And it's not an ending point, because a museum is a continuum. A cemetery could be an ending point. So it's a difference there, because you demand acknowledgement and respect. And that's the beauty of what I'm feeling right now with this block party.
Absolutely.
And you hear them all over the world. You hear Bun B and Roxanne Shanté, Cool V on Rock the Bells Radio every day. Channel 43, LL Cool J, gigantic festival last week. So it's the combined efforts of all of this that is preservation. You don't take care of something, somebody gonna take it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And matter of fact, wait a minute. Come out here, Cool V.
Yes.
Put your hands together for Cut Master
Cut
Cool
Master
V.
Cool V.
You know, I just don't feel right if I don't bring, you know, like every MC has to have their DJ. It's just that's hip hop right there. So I just needed to bring Cool V out here, and he's also on the radio with me every day. Big shout out to Cut Master Cool V. Now, how do I feel today? Coming from a time when they told me that hip hop had an expiration date, like milk. They told me it wasn't gonna be around long. They made sure that they said that my publishing and my writers weren't gonna be worth anything, that I should sell it right now. I should get what I can out of it, because in another 10 years, this hip hop thing is going to go away. And when I would look at the generation before me, I would see that they was kind of down on their luck. So I started believing that. I started thinking that maybe that could be the case. But my heart said, no, there's too much love for this thing called hip hop. There's too much talent. There's too much that needs to be said. There's too many platforms that we are blocked from, that the only platform we have is a microphone, a speaker, some turntables, and tell it in the park. And when we were able to start making records, we were able to put what we were going through on wax. So now the world can hear it. I also want to thank the military, because see, the military was really responsible for taking hip hop all over the world. Because when someone would come, and they would be stationed in a different, like at a different fort or wherever they were located. When they would come, they would get copies of the tapes, and they would take them with them to Germany. They would take them with them when they would go overseas. So it's a big deal to know that sitting here right now, that between understanding the importance of what hip hop is to everyone, but to the younger voices, having a place to be able to tell their story was only being told in hip hop. So now I'm really honored, because I just wish I could find that person and say, that expiration date was wrong.
Right.
We're gonna have to add something to that. You know, so I feel honored. And honestly, it feels a little bit surreal. It feels like a dream almost, because again, like I said, they told me I'm participating in something that was done in the parks for free and had an expiration date. And hip hop will never expire. Please believe it.
You know, as I get older and I started to put my life in perspective and my legacy in perspective, opportunities like this really stand out. You know, I have grandkids now, and you know, my grandkids are at their parents' house, and they see pictures of Paw, and they talk highly of Paw. Well, that's kind of what a child does for a parent, you know. And when my grandkids come to my house and they see pictures of Paw on the wall, grandma speaks highly of Paw, that's kind of what grandma is supposed to do, right? But being a part of the anthology, of, you know, being honored by the Smithsonian and having a piece of me be remembered in a federal building, that's people that don't know me, right? But respect and value what I've done and honor my contribution. That's different, right? Because even when mom and dad move to a new house and grandpa and grandma are no longer around, they'll always be able to come to DC and look at this building and be like, my pawpaw is a part of the history of that building. My pawpaw is a part of what helped to build this building, and I can go in there right now and see my pawpaw's music and my pawpaw's history and culture be celebrated. Those are the real wins for me and my family, you know?
Absolutely.
As far as the money we make, that stuff, you know, it varies. I've been poor, I've been rich, you know, that stuff varies. And accolades from the outside world, that stuff is good to have. But to be able to have like a physical, tangible piece of your legacy always available to generations and generations after you. Look, I don't have the kind of money to buy a wing in a hospital, right? I don't have the kind of money to buy a hall at a university, right? but I was a good enough MC that all MCs and appreciators of MCs will know that I was here, that I existed, that I killed it, right? And you can always go and see
That's right.
proof of that right there in that building, thanks to people like Dwan and Timothy and people like yourselves, you know what I'm saying? So as a practitioner and a fan of hip-hop, I love it with y'all. I breathe it and live it with y'all, but I also appreciate y'all appreciating us as well.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. The Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop and Rap is available in the bookstore. We want you to stick around. There's going to be all kinds of stuff happening tonight. J Period's in the house.
Yes.
We got the DMV MC Showcase coming up here. You're going to not want to miss that. Moo Fresh as well. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, we want you to tune in tomorrow evening. The conversation is going to continue. There's going to be a thing called God Talk 2.0, Hip Hop and Black Faith. It's going to be online here, the National Museum of African American History and Culture at 7 p.m. It's going to have Big Frida, Neelam Hakeem, Sarok, D1, and many others. And tonight at 7 p.m., J Period, Roxanne Shanté, Bun B, and Rozelle live right here on this stage. So please come back around for that. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all to the amazing panelists. I've been really moved to be able to be here and stick around for a lot more.